For the past several years, for as long as I can remember, I've dealt with intense mania. I essentially like to call it midnight mania because the mania really hits its peak around nighttime, so around um, 10, 11, 12, sometimes a little earlier. I start to feel it around 7, 6, it just depends. But you might be wondering how I'm defining mania, um, and that's a good question. Certainly, I'm defining it by fleeting thoughts. I'm defining it by the quickness of thought, by almost intense thought that is so powerful that you basically want to act on the thoughts now and that impair your judgment in various ways. So there have been nights where I've been so manic that I've basically wanted to act on my thoughts and ideas at that moment, even though it's like 12 or 1 o'clock at night. And that's difficult because obviously you can't act on these grandiose ideas, so to speak, because there's a lot that you need to do. Mania has always been an interesting phenomena for me, especially the way in which it delves into psychosis and delusion specifically, the way in which I think about things, and the way in which it causes me to think about things. So my perspective definitely changes. The best way to describe it is my reality becomes destabilized. And by that, I basically mean that it's hard for me to understand what's really happening, because my mind feels so connected to the world and yet so out of touch. And it's a very interesting contradiction, but that's what it feels like. To kind of ground this experience, I can talk about a time where I was basically wreaking havoc at a local mall. And I was doing that by yelling pretty intensely and yelling just about how I felt that nobody cared. And you would think after this intense event that all of my energy would have been drained. But after the police arrested me and put me through this brutal scene and basically brutalized me, I remember I basically had a dopamine spike when I was in jail. I kind of saw the whole thing as funny, in fact. I was scared as hell too, because I was like, I knew this was going to happen if I didn't get a hold of my mind. And at the time I had delusions that imaginary characters such as the Black Queen were acting in my life, as well as the Snake Angel. I had the delusion that they were acting in my life and that they were essentially guiding my decisions, and that I had told them that I was going to get in trouble if they were reckless, and of course they were reckless. And so I blamed it on these characters. The characters could be seen as personalities, or whatever you want to call them. But the point being, this was a very manic moment for me, because despite the circumstances, my thoughts were still going. I wasn't slowing down. My judgment was clearly impaired. And yet I had the dopamine spike. And yet, somehow, through all of this, I managed to feel good. Surprisingly, that experience in jail actually felt pretty good, for the most part. I mean, sure, it was rough because I was still in jail, and the guards were mean, and they were very abrupt. But surprisingly, I had a good time because basically I just imagined Tyson, who I describe as a mind freak, was basically in my head, and he was just helping me relax and helping me kind of realize that everything was going to be okay as I laid in my bed. And in the jail, they forced you not to wear clothes, which was really weird, but it added to the kind of feeling of vulnerability that I always feel this imaginary character, Tyson, has always imputed to me in my delusions and in my mind. It's basically this idea of having a vulnerable mind. Basically, I see mental illness as a mind in its most vulnerable state, and I think that's a powerful way of looking at it. So that was an instance of mania and an instance of intense mania, and it definitely affected it definitely affected my life in the future to come, and it will continue to affect my life because I always think of these memories and they evoke a lot of interesting ideas, and they form the basis of my fiction. And yeah, so that's what it's like living with a mental illness. That is an intense experience, but I hope that through the bizarre nature of the delusions and the mania, the psychosis and the unstable moods, you can find some level of relatability. This is Phoenix, and thanks.